Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're trekking north, way north, to the Canadian Yukon.
Sounds chilly.
It is, but also totally fascinating. We're going to be talking all about Arctic ground squirrels and family ties.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so specifically a 1982 study on how kinship influences their behavior. I was reading up on this, and it turns out that female squirrels, well, they stick close to their families way more than the males do.
That's right. They're far more likely to stay near their birthplaces than males,
Yeah.
which creates a really interesting dynamic.
So that's what this study looked at.
Yeah. The study set out to investigate whether family ties play a role in how these females interact and organize themselves spatially.
Okay, so we're talking family favoritism, maybe even a bit of squirrel nepotism.
Exactly.
I am all ears.
The researcher Ian McLean, he meticulously tracked their movements and interactions even where they built their burrows to see if relatedness correlated with certain behaviors.
So close relatives were basically best buds hanging out all the time.
You're on the right track. Close female relatives, like mothers and daughters or sisters, had significantly more home range overlap than those who were distantly related or unrelated.
Interesting. So are we talking shared resources? Like, hey, sis, can I borrow a cup of acorns?
That's a great question. While the study doesn't explicitly confirm resource sharing, it's definitely a possibility.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really intriguing.
Okay.
Were they actively cooperating, or was this overlap simply because they were born in the same area? That's the mystery.
Ooh, I love a good mystery. Okay, so what about their actual interactions? Was it all friendly chit-chat and sharing snacks between relatives?
Well, maybe not snacks, but McLean observed a lot more amicable behavior among close kin.
Okay.
Things like touching noses and mouths, sniffing each other, even grooming, and fewer squabbles compared to their more distant relatives.
So picture this, a little squirrel greeting her aunt with a nose boop. Okay.
Adorable, right? But hold on, how do they even know who their aunts are? Do they have some kind of squirrel family reunion to keep track of everyone? That's one of the biggest questions in animal behavior. How do animals recognize their kin?
Yeah.
It probably involves a combination of sense, visual cues, and early life experiences.
Fascinating. Any particular memorable examples of these family interactions in the study?
Definitely. There were 16 instances of grooming observed.
Okay.
And here's the kicker. Almost every single one of them was between close relatives. That really highlights the importance of family bonds for these squirrels.
Okay, so close relatives are hanging out grooming each other. I'm picturing them all snuggled up in one big happy burrow. Am I right?
Well, not quite. This is where it gets really interesting. Before the babies were born, the mothers actually spaced their burrows pretty far apart, even if they were close relatives.
Wait, what? I thought we were talking about tight-knit families. Why this separate housing situation, especially during such a crucial time?
That's the clumping mystery.
Okay.
You see, once the young squirrels emerged from the burrows, the mothers often moved their offspring to the same burrow system, but only if they were close relatives. Over half of them did this.
So they start out distant, but then suddenly decide to become roommates.
Yeah.
Like a reality TV show for squirrels.
It might seem strange, but it's important to note that they weren't just randomly joining forces with any neighbor.
Right.
It had to be family.
Okay, I'm hooked. Why the sudden change of heart? What's the benefit of communal living for these squirrels?
The study suggests a few possible advantages. One is protection from predators,
Okay.
particularly male squirrels who sometimes commit infanticide.
Hold on, infanticide. That's a little dark for our family-friendly squirrel story. Are we talking like evil stepdad squirrels here?
Unfortunately, yes. Male Arctic ground squirrels are known to kill offspring that aren't their own to increase their chances of reproductive success. It's a complex and disturbing behavior, but it highlights a potential benefit of this clumping behavior.
Okay.
More adults around means more eyes to watch for danger and defend against threats.
Makes sense. So is it basically safety in numbers?
That's one possibility. But as with everything in nature, there are likely trade-offs involved. We'll delve into those after. We were talking about those trade-offs involved with this clumping behavior right before we left off.
Right, those pros and cons. It sounds like there are some serious risks involved, even with the added protection from those infanticidal males.
Absolutely. While having more eyes on the lookout might deter some predators, a larger group of young squirrels could also attract more attention.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's a delicate balance.
So it's a gamble. They could be safer from individual threats, but more vulnerable to a larger attack.
Exactly. And the study actually found that the females weren't all that great at defending against attacks, whether from predators or those aggressive males.
Mm.
So the effectiveness of this group defense strategy is still up for debate.
Hmm. That makes the whole clump thing even more puzzling. Why take the risk if the payoff isn't guaranteed?
It's a great question, and it highlights the complexity of animal behavior. There may be other benefits we haven't even considered, or maybe the costs are outweighed by some crucial factor we're overlooking. More research is always needed.
Of course. Well, what about those orphan squirrels? We talked earlier about the possibility of other females stepping in if a mother dies. Did the study see any evidence of that?
There wasn't a direct example of a mother dying after clumping, but there was an interesting observation from 1977. A female was snatched by a hawk right on the day her young emerged from the burrow.
Oh no, that's heartbreaking. What happened to the babies?
Well, a neighboring female who had previously interacted with the deceased mother started spending time with the orphan group even though she hadn't clumped her own litter with them.
That's amazing. A little bit of squirrel compassion in the face of tragedy.
And one of the orphaned females actually survived and went on to breed the next year.
Wow, that's truly remarkable. It sounds like there's a sense of community support, or at least tolerance, among these females.
It's certainly possible, but remember, this study only captured a few years in one location. More research is needed to understand the long-term consequences of clumping and what factors might influence a female's decision to join a group.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got the possible benefits, increased vigilance, combined defense, maybe some dilution effect, and potential support for orphans. And we've got the potential costs, increased visibility, resource competition, and the question of whether females are obligated to care for another's young if the mother dies. It's a complicated equation.
Indeed. And remember, we're only focusing on female relatives here. The dynamics might be completely different for males or for mixed groups.
Right, we're just seeing one piece of the puzzle. But even this one piece raises so many questions, like how do the young squirrels benefit from this arrangement? Is it just passive protection, or is there something more going on?
That's a brilliant question, and it leads us to one of the most thought-provoking findings of this entire study. Remember how those natal burrows were spaced far apart before birth, but then some females chose to clump their young at emergence?
Yeah, that whole separate houses then sudden roommates thing. It still seems so bizarre.
What's fascinating is that this selective clumping might actually be key to understanding how young Arctic ground squirrels learn to identify distant relatives later in life.
Wait, are you saying that growing up in a clumped environment actually helps them recognize their extended family?
Exactly. Think about it. The young squirrels emerge into a burrow system shared with close kin, but also with the offspring of those close kin who are their distant relatives.
So it's like a built-in family reunion. They're learning faces and scents from a very early age.
Precisely. And that early exposure could create a template for kin recognition that they carry with them throughout their lives, helping them maintain those social bonds even as they disperse and establish their own territories.
And this is blowing my mind. It's like a whole new level of squirrel social complexity. But how did this mechanism itself evolve? What were the selective pressures that favored this particular form of kin recognition?
That's the million-dollar question. Unraveling the evolutionary history of such behaviors requires careful analysis, comparing different species, looking at genetic factors, and considering the ecological context. It's a reminder that even seemingly small details can have profound implications for the evolution of social structures.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground here, but I feel like we're just scratching the surface of this squirrel saga.
I agree. The most important takeaway is that animal behavior is rarely black and white. There are always trade-offs, complexities, and unexpected twists.
And just when you think you've got it figured out, those squirrels throw you a curveball.
Exactly. And that's what makes studying them so rewarding. There's always something new to learn, always another mystery to unravel.
So we've spent all this time talking about these squirrels. And honestly, I'm even more fascinated by them now.
I know, right? It's incredible how much we can learn from these little creatures.
I know, they're like tiny furry ambassadors from a hidden world, right?
Absolutely. And their family dramas are way more interesting than anything you'd find on reality TV.
Right, like who knew squirrels could be so complicated? I mean, think about all the things we've discussed today. Those natal burrow placements, the whole clumping mystery, and then those infanticidal males. Yikes.
It's a lot to take in, but I think that's what makes animal behavior so captivating.
It really does. For me, the most mind-blowing takeaway is that idea of clumping as a way to learn about family.
Right. It's like a built-in social networking system for squirrels.
Exactly. By sharing a burrow system with both close and distant relatives, young squirrels are essentially getting a crash course in kin recognition. They're learning who's who from a very early age, building a foundation for social interactions later in life.
Precisely, and that early exposure could create a template for kin recognition that they carry with them throughout their lives, helping them maintain those social bonds even as they disperse and establish their own territories.
It makes you wonder if similar mechanisms might be at play in other social animals. Could early exposure to extended family influence social development in ways we haven't even considered?
That's a fascinating question and one that deserves further investigation. I mean, imagine the possibilities. How do different environments, different rearing practices, different social structures shape the way animals learn to recognize and interact with kin? There's so much more to discover.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on today.
We have, and you know what? I hope everyone listening is inspired to go out and observe the natural world with fresh eyes.
Me too. You never know what amazing stories are unfolding right under our noses, or in this case, maybe under a pile of leaves. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll be back soon with more fascinating stories from the world of science and nature.